Uh, Hello and welcome to our public session with the programs of the New Center for Research and Practice. The New Center, the New Center is a para-academic institution that offers cutting-edge seminars on arts. Sorry, I was with the YouTube page open and I could hear my echo. I'll start again. Sorry. The New Center is a para-academic institution that offers cutting-edge seminars on art, philosophy, and the humanities in general. Within it, we run 4 certificate programs, each of them led by one of our programmers: critical philosophy run by Reza Negarestani, transdisciplinary studies by Jason Mohaghegh, post-planetary universal design by Ed Keller and Carla Leitão, and art and curatorial studies run by our new programmer and instructor Cécile Malaspina. My name is Cécile. I'm a Brazilian researcher at the New Center, holding a certificate by the Critical Philosophy program. And I recently finished a master thesis on philosophy, approaching artificial general intelligence and forms of life, using Reza Negarestani's intelligence and spirit as the main points of departure. And I also work with noise and club music. I'm very happy to be once again moderating our public session, now inaugurating our spring and summer season. And as some of you may know, right now our applications for the certificate programs with the possibility of full and partial scholarship are open until today. And if you have been thinking about applying, this is a great chance to meet each of the programmers responsible for our certificate programs, to know more about our upcoming seminars, and also a way to get to know more about the New Center as an institution. The New Center, just to say a few words about the New Center, it's an international nonprofit higher education institute in the arts, humanities, and sciences, offering graduate and professional development level certificate programs, workshops, seminars, exhibitions, residencies, and conferences in arts and curatorial practice, critical philosophy, post-planetary universal design, and transdisciplinary studies. Our carefully selected networks of thinkers and scholars advise and assist those seeking to make the transition between undergraduate and graduate schools, between graduate school and the professions, and between early career to advanced careers development. Through studying at the New Center, students practice graduate and professional development level research in a manner that does not interrupt their existing artistic, academic, or professional aspirations, but instead complements, enhances, and intensifies them. The New Center is conceived upon the idea that the space of knowledge is a laboratory for navigating the links between thought and action. Our pedagogical approach bootstraps the conventional role of the arts, humanities, and sciences to construct new forms of research and practice alongside, within, and between the existing disciplines and technologies. The New Center's aim is a constructivist one, to assemble an environment, both virtual and actual, that inspires our members to invent alternate understandings that can be put into collective practice. So if you want to know more about us, our programs, and upcoming seminars, you can check our YouTube channel and also access our website, thenewcenter.org. And if you have any questions that might not be answered along with the presentations, just write them in the YouTube chat so we can read them after. I want to announce right at the beginning that the New Center's instructor, Tony Yannick, will be leading our first hands-on workshop on database design, programming, and data visualization for artists and humanities scholars. I think we can start with Reza because he unfortunately can't be with us the whole time.
Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, we have more senior veterans here. We can start with them, and then I will go after them.
Okay, so we start with our new programmer for the Arts and Curatorial Practice program, Cécile Malaspina, who's also a program director at the Collège International de Philosophie in Paris and visiting research fellow at King's College London, where she's running an open access research seminar titled Anesthetics of Noise, hosted by the Departments of French and Digital Humanities. She's the author of An Epistemology of Noise in 2018, and principal translator with the collaboration of John Rogoff of Gilbert Simondon's On the Mode of Existence of Technical Objects. At the Art and Curatorial Practice program, she will be instructing in the seminar's variations on the Great Refusal and Ruining the Vibe. The New Center's Art and Curatorial Practice program is one of a few international curricula to invite creative practitioners to think on their feet. The program recognizes that the students enrolled are artists, curators, publishers, editors, and writers who have skin in the game. It fosters an emancipatory shift of critique in the context of a global digitalization and climate chaos, from laments to an investigation on the conditions of possibility of art. This program will also include seminars by Jean Shrub, from music and cosmicity to sound and interiority, Ross McEwen, Diamond and Discord, Anatomy of Tao, Simone Hoey, Elemental Ethnography, Encounters with the Sensorial Analytics, and JP Cajon with From Binary Obedience to Normative Freedom. So please, Cécile, take it away. You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much for having me, for allowing me to be part of the New Center for Research and Practice, whose activities I had been following from a distance for many years, always amazed at the speakers that you managed to attract and at the amazingly creative diaspora of artists that participate in the halo of your activities. So I'm really thrilled to be involved with the art and curatorial program. And my own background is one originally training as an artist and a curator, but in a way, I think it's important to say that my path today back to the arts and curatorial program for the New Center is a bit counterintuitive, because I'm coming back to the arts through what Plato used to call the great detour, by having turned my back on the arts. So it was by studying philosophy, and precisely not aesthetics, but studying philosophy of science and technology, and that going all the way down the tunnel, I ended up somehow back with art and curatorial. And it does make more sense to me now, but the reason I'm also introducing it this way is to say that the understanding of aesthetics that I want to bring to this program, and the way that I want to look at it together with artists and curators and people from different fields, is to call into question what Whitehead called the great bifurcation. The idea that experience can be split into experience that leads to knowledge, empirical experience, and experience that leads to value judgments and sentiments or feelings. So my feeling is that in a way, if you want to look at what contemporary art is doing now, if you want to care for its endeavors, it's more relevant to look in the same direction as artists are looking, rather than from the kind of critic standpoint, trying to codify, understand what the kind of dominant concepts are, or create a kind of narrative for it that, you know, packages the art of the 80s, of the 90s, of the 2010s, and so forth. So our approach is rather going to be to bring people together who are not necessarily always from the arts, although obviously also from the arts, and you know, look at philosophical problems together that can be aesthetic in nature but don't have to be necessarily, and that always look at it from a slightly polemical angle, so trying to problematize the situation. So the first seminar, as you mentioned, is going to be Ruining the Vibe, Resonance and its Discontents. And here we're going to look at this, at the concept of resonance and its multiple metaphorical expressions in contemporary discourse. And we have a series of amazing speakers who have agreed to join us for this. Prominently, Hartmut Rosa, the author of Resonance, A Sociology of Our Relationship to the World. Alexandre Chèvremont, who's a professor in philosophy and aesthetics at the University of Lyon, and he specializes in sound and resonance. We have Makis Solomos, who is a renowned specialist of Xenakis, and who has a forthcoming book with Routledge called Exploring the Ecologies of Music and Sound, the Living World, the Mental and the Social in Today's Music, Sound, Art and Activism. We have also the members of a research group called the NRU, Noise Research Union, of which I am a member as well, and which comprises Martina Raponi, who's the originator of Noiser, Miguel Prado, whose thesis on noise will soon come out with Roman and Littlefield, Sonia de Jager, who is the originator of an amazing festival called Reverberations Festival, event series that last took place in Rotterdam. Inigo Wilkins, whose book Irreversible Noise is coming out imminently, we hope, with Urbanomic, and the artist and philosopher Martin, whose book Social Dissonance has just come out as well. So this is going to be the survey seminar in which we have going to have also a couple of panel discussions at the end. And we'll be looking at the concept of resonance, if you like, through its opposite, to see how resonance can turn bad, how resonance can turn into what the physicist Hake called an enslavement principle or phase locking, and see how the ideal of resonance, if you like, even axiomatic resonance or the ideal of axiomatic resonance, that philosophy would like all its statements to be fully coherent, how that can turn on itself in a way. So this is the idea of this survey seminar, ruining the vibe, resonance and its discontents. And we're going to stay in the same spirit of contrariety with the seminar that I will introduce, which is the idea of the great refusal and the variations of the great refusal. This seminar starts with the idea of Dante Alighieri. In his Antechamber to Hell, he recognizes the shadow of the one who committed the great refusal. It's a notion that Alfred North Whitehead picks up on, and then Herbert Marcuse picks up on, except in this kind of descendants of the notion of the great refusal, it has, it turns from its opposite, it kind of oscillates between different opposed meanings of what the great refusal could mean. And so we're going to, rather than look at the great refusal only through the lens of Herbert Marcuse as the great refusal of injustices of our time and the rallying cry of emancipatory movements, we're going to look at the complexities that are inherent in this difficult history of the notion and the different ways that it manifests itself in contemporary society, for example, in the form of the Great Resignation, which is an expression that has been attributed, for instance, to the artist, to the gymnast Simone Biles, who famously retreated from the Olympic Games because she was feeling unwell. And that has been called both the Great Resignation and the Great Refusal. In her wake, people have said this is the start of the Great Refusal. Others have said this is the start of the Great Resignation. A year later, you had a tsunami of resignations in the labor market that made people talk about the Great Resignation, and others talk about the Great Refusal of capitalism. So this bipolar nature of the notion of the Great Refusal and its emancipatory potential is going to be the subject of my seminar. So many more seminars to follow with many more amazing speakers, hopefully. And yeah, thank you very much for hopefully joining me and being part of the journey.
Yeah, thank you a lot, Cécile. Cécile, this was very clarifying and exciting to I'm really excited to watch your seminars. So now we can move to our critical philosophy program with Reza Negarestani, who's a philosopher who has contributed extensively to journals and anthologies and lectured at numerous international universities and institutes. His current philosophical project is focused on rationalist universalism, beginning with the evolution of the modern system of knowledge and advancing toward contemporary philosophies of rationalism, their procedures, as well as their demands for special forms of human conduct. He's the author of Cyclonopedia, Intelligence and Spirits, and the forthcoming Abducting the Outside. The critical philosophy program is devoted to developing philosophy adequate to the problems and questions posed by the 21st century. The rise of the Anthropocene threatens global catastrophe, developments in physics, neurology, and biology, transformations in global capitalism, and how the military, media, and economic systems are now intertwined and exceed the boundaries of nation states, have all generated new conceptual challenges for philosophy. At this season, this program will be counting on the seminars by Negarestani himself, The Ape and the Sea, The Fragmented Legacy of Freud at the Dawn of Psychoanalysis, and our instructors Ana Longo, Rule-Governed Games in Analytic and Continental Tradition, J.P. Cajon, From Wide Obedience to Normative Freedom, Cécile Malaspina with Variations on the Great Refusal, which is a joint initiative between these two programs, Daniel Sassilotto, Learning How to Die, Socratic Discipline and the Philosophical Life, Carl Sachs, Analytic Marxism and the Pittsburgh School, Adam Berg, The Tribulations of Reason and Type Rationalism, and Ross McElwain with Diamond and Discord, Anatomy of Doubt. So please, Reza, take it away. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Kasia. I'm honored to have this program again at the New Center. As you're familiar with critical philosophy, we try to usually bring back our regular instructors, but also add new ones. And also we try to use also a certain sort of inserting self-critical seminars that can actually criticize what we have done already, or the prominent and dominant sort of trajectory that New Center Critical Philosophy program has taken. So with that in mind, I invited Carl Sachs to in fact make a kind of create a critical fork, and hence a field of resonance, critical resonance with other philosophers, as most of you are aware of. Even though we try to not basically belong or endorse one camp in philosophy, we do actually have a certain sort of thematics each semester. It might be oriented toward analytic philosophy or continental philosophy, or this sort of line of thought or another. So I thought that it is actually would be a great idea to ask one of our instructors who has already taught, who in fact actually launches a critique, a class that mostly involves a critique of, for example, rationality, neo-rationalism, and in this case, Pittsburgh School of Neo-Hegelianisms. And this would actually bring a good opportunity to kind of get to know the weakness of some of these philosophical positions, opening a dialogue, and also for those who have membership, going back, looking at the archive, the classes that were, for example, centered on these sorts of topics, now seeing them in a different eye, right, from a more critical point of view. And of course, always it is not fair to merely have one critical voice. We should always have two, hence the critical fork. So Adam Berg is going to teach a class about genealogy of rationality, sort of post-World War II. As you're aware, post-World War II, there is a fundamental mistrust in rationality, and also fundamental mistrust in irrationality, particularly in German philosophy post-World War II. And these, of course, create a certain sort of historical moment in philosophy. Reason and its other should be brought into a dialectic once again. And Adam Berg is precisely going to look at this issue from the genealogy of rationality and looking at certain pathologies of reason, but also why the dialectic of reason, the other, should be held as a philosophical opening and a line of inquiry that should be continued. Then we have Cécile, of course. She introduced her seminar. We have Anna Longo, who's going to talk about in the seminar about games and language games, particularly within analytic and continental philosophy, and in a sort of trajectory where game and play are pitted against one another. That's not merely following the rules of the game, of linguistic games, but also being capable of suspending some and introducing others. And that would be more like a creative approach to linguistic games. A sort of dynamic approach which we would usually associate with play as opposed to simply games where the rules are fixed or somehow static at the beginning. Then we have Daniel Sassilotto. I asked Dan to kind of make a U-turn for this class instead of talking about analytic philosophy, which I know that is quite fond of, to talk about something that really makes a philosopher to be proud philosopher. And I know that Dan is a philosopher who's essentially his life is just a passion for philosophy. And he truly actually follows this. So he came up with the idea of the meaning of philosophical life as a way of dying, namely the Socratic way. So this is Dan, no more Sellars this time, going back to the ancients and learning how to die easily. And then we have Jean-Pierre Caron, who is continuing some of his previous seminars, but in a different setup, about rule following, obedience, and what we do when we follow rules, rules of normativity, right? And it goes obviously through Wittgenstein and other philosophers to touch on these subjects. Then we have Colin Drums, who's going to talk about the problem of a statecraft as a design problem, as a constitutional design problem, and what is this design problem then in the age of algorithms, and whether it actually repeats some of the blind spots of the statecraft in traditional sense or not. It always has a keen critical eye to kind of take these matters apart. Then, if I'm not mistaken, so my apologies, my memory is short. So then also, and Cassia, please remind me if I miss someone. So lastly, as I said, we always bring a new blood, fresh blood, to the critical philosophy. And usually the fresh blood is someone who actually puts something, I don't mean it as a young person, but as someone who puts something on the table that we haven't actually touched so far. A philosophical line of inquiry worthy of the 21st century, right? And this is Demon and Discord, a seminar about DAO, which is basically decentralized autonomous organizations. Russ McElwin is a artist, theorist, and a publisher. He runs a small press called Impossible Object. Extremely brilliant researcher, and the reason that I invited him to teach this course is precisely because I know among the people who have looked at cryptocurrency-enabled sort of phenomena like NFT and DAO, decentralized, and also decentralized finance. I know that Ross has an extensive, kind of presence in these scenes since almost their development with some of the people who have been involved. He's in constant conversation with the developers. And I thought that he's actually the best, precisely because he's not your possible, what you might call to be crypto enthusiast or DAO enthusiast. He has a very critical sense, which I think is quite sharp, and he's not going to merely, kind of like promoting crypto or NFT or DAO, but he essentially wants to see how they might actually fundamentally transform into the infrastructure of a new planetary governance, decentralized governance. And of course, I will be teaching as well. I thought that I should actually also make a U-turn. If I ask Dan to make a U-turn on analytic philosophy, I should also make one. And I will be, it's a seminar which Jason also agreed, my dear friend Jason, agreed to host it for transdisciplinary program as well. So it would be a joint critical philosophy and transdisciplinary program, and it is about Uncle Freud and his inner circle, the first unconscious boy club, so to speak. And the point here, I think that it is actually a very good time with social upheaval, with the intensification of rabid capitalism and all what you might call to be tribulations, which are collective at this point. It would be actually great to revisit Freud's idea of the unconscious and trauma. But it wouldn't be merely rereading Freud, but rather testing whether his primary concepts and also those of the inner circle hold any actually ground in the light of development of psychoanalysis, neuroscience, and scientific method, right? And of course, if they have any sort of ground, they hold any sort of ground, they still have a semblance of relevance, then we should actually think about whether that they are still applicable in the field of psychoanalysis, or perhaps such concepts belong to a different realm, such as that of the political realm, right? Yes, so it's essentially a course of retesting rather than rereading for it. And that is about our seminars at Critical Philosophy, and of course, joint seminars with other programs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reza. Very interesting seminars and overall theme for the program this season. Now we are going to go to our Postplanetary Universal Design program, which is run by Ed Keller and Carla Leitão. Ed and Carla are the founders of the AUM Studio and Spec AE, which joins the Data Matter group show at the Venice Biennale in 2018. Keller and Leitão have convened more than 20 international conferences and lecture series, and the work and writing has appeared in Volume, Punctum, Triple Ampersand, Evolo, Metamorphosis, Wired, and many others. Keller is a designer, professor, writer, musician, multimedia artist, and independent scholar. He was the director of the Center for Transformative Media at the New School, associate dean at Parsons College, and from 2009 to 2020, he was associate professor at Parsons. He has spoken on architecture, film, artificial intelligence, technology, and ecology internationally. He has also recently done seminars at the New School, Parsons, on topics such as post-planetary design, soundscape, and designing AI. Carla Leitão, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us today, is an architect, professor, and writer. She is also a lecturer at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute School of Architecture. And Leitão's studio and seminars explore the intersection of architecture, urban systems, technology, ubiquitous cultures, and immersive VR at RPIs. Leitão has also developed at Cravelab academic work and research around concepts of assemblies and front-end design for control rooms, interactive spaces, and education environments. To say a few words about the program, it investigates how design practice can operate as a way of thinking of projecting and enacting structural changes in the world by entirely reimagining environmental paradigms, as well as the integration of disciplines and practices that produce them. Leitão and Keller will be instructing the seminar Studio 3, Cosmological Brain, through this program, which will also include seminars by Stephanie Wakefield, Anthropocene Design, Infrastructure, Imagination, and Experimentation at the end, Colin Drum, Science, Designs, and Sovereignty, and Thomas Mikal, Acid Ecosophy for a Kaleidoscopic Machinic Phylum. So Ed, if you please could take the way.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Hi.
It's really fantastic to be here with everybody and to continue this project. So many thanks to the New Center for hosting us on this and for the spirit of collaboration with everyone. I guess I'd like to start with a quick survey of what we've tried to do across the past year. Very, very synthetic and brief. In answering the question, what we're working on by thinking through the implications of post-planetary and universal design. And I'll look at a few of the seminars that we've taught and that our guests have taught to then bring us to the Studio 3 project and Stephanie Wakefield's seminar later this year. You know, we ask the question, where does design fit in the broader frame of thinking the planet, and what would the remit for design be if it has a universal aspiration, universal not just for humanity as a design subject, but for the totality of the planet and beyond. And so the trajectory that we wanted to pursue across this year and a half, 2-year arc began with the positioning of design as a world-building exercise in Studio One World, looking at the questions of programming ontology through the seminar that Ezio Blazzetti and Danielle Willems taught earlier in the year, moving through an articulation of atmospheres as a way of thinking beyond the limit, the hard limit of the planet, to thinking cosmos in the studio that the design studio, research studio that we're currently running right now, Carla and myself. Essentially, this is a very simple way of reducing the problem of universal design to something like object, field, and totality. But we felt it was a useful rubric to rethink what it would mean to construe nature in the face of the undermining of nature outside our planetary comfort zone. Because we're both coming out of architecture, very transdisciplinary approaches to architecture, but architecture, we are based in the framework that architecture's conception of itself as a discipline for centuries depends on this idea of the artificial in relationship to the natural. And so incomplete definitions of artificial and natural are a kind of a demon at the base of architecture's practice fundamentally. But also the primal human action, or the primal universal action. Do you build a bonfire, or do you build a hut? And this is at the foundation of architecture as a discipline, Logier's primitive hut, but it's also at the foundation of information theory, thermodynamics, the work of people like Freeman Dyson, Chuck Lineweaver, etc. And so this has been the core that we've attempted to articulate across this year, to think multiple scales, from the scales that we're familiar with as designers and architects, to the universal, to posit the question, where does complexity emerge, and what are the drivers that produce complexity for quasi-negentropic systems on Earth, architectures, cities, organisms, to general models. So the tension, as we put it in one of our studio briefs, the tension between codex of preservation or rituals of conflagration configures the base of organic and planetary life, and the negative entropies of design, and also of cognitive platforms, of cognitive architectures. So we tried to articulate this question around nature and new natures in this broader framework. As Michel Serres, the philosopher, put it, from the center of the sun to the black depths of space, the organism sits as a temporal converter, and complex systems sit as temporal converters, linking linear and nonlinear time, simple time, and complex time. So this has been a kind of an obsession, I think, for Carla and myself for many years, that we've tried to bring to this very beautiful platform and framework at the New Center. And this has driven the kind of conversations we've had with some of the people that we've invited. Again, some of the courses that have run to this point, including Ezio Blazzetti and Danielle Willems' program Ontologies course, focusing on adaptive algorithmic systems and coded worlds, the Atmospheres lecture series that we ran some months ago with Amanda Beach, Elise Misau-Hunchuk, and Nandita Biswas-Malamfi, thinking very deeply around, driven by Nandita's concept of gestural ecologies, actually, that particular lecture series, and trying to understand how representational systems and modes of thinking through representation and design could take on planetary scale design challenges. Of course, Nandita's work in some of her writing takes on Frank Herbert's Dune, and uses Dune as a kind of a figure to understand what a gestural ecology might be, both culturally, socially, techno-socially, and ecologically. And so that way of framing the question dovetails very well with what we had attempted to craft in the arc across this year, the 2-year period. Right now we're finishing the Studio 2 Cosmos project, which again asks what an operational new nature might be and how architecture would transform into landscape, extend beyond a horizon, and link to systems off-planet. The stronger interest in the discussions that we've been having in this session are oriented around mapping and identifying the kinds of bodies that would be constituted by cosmological and cosmopolitical forces. And so thinking universal design hand in hand with what it would mean to frame a cosmopolitics, for whom and by whom, is kind of at the core of that. What would one design to catalyze a new nature? This is what we've been asking. Of course, looking at the work of writers like Stanislav Lem in his Master's Voice, or Lucian's three-body problem, are also at the center of these kinds of discussions, because through hard science fiction, they think across multiple scales and essentially offer a kind of a point of engagement for both critical design and also framing what a cosmopolitics might be. So looking forward to later in the year, the upcoming seminars. The Cosmological Brain continues this project, asking what a socio-political genetics, a pedagogies of a general economy might be, and what would be the environmental controls necessary to build not just a cosmopolitics, but a cosmopolitically inclined brain. And we continue these discussions, which we've been having for many years with leading AI developers like Ben Goertzel, in some of the conferences that we've put together at the New School over the past decade and a half. So we ask, in that vein, what infrastructural captures of attention that are currently operative on our planet would lead towards or away from a general cosmopolitical agency of mind? And again, asking always, where does design sit in this kind of framework? What are the universalist ambitions of design? Are we designing for the different aspects of planetary and universally scaled cognitive architecture that impacts us here? Or are we designing for a potential general intellect which might operate as an artifact functioning across billions of years, cultural infrastructures, linkages of feeling from the viral scale to the general principles of feedback and self-regulation and awareness? So this is what we'll be looking at in the fall in the research seminar that Carla and I will be teaching, the Cosmological Brain Project. We've also invited Stephanie Wakefield to teach the Anthropocene Design, Infrastructure, Imagination, and Experimentation at the End seminar. A few words about Stephanie and her background. She's a geographer. Her work has explored the political, the technical, and philosophical transformations of urban life and infrastructure. I've been lucky to join Stephanie for some of her seminars when she was teaching at the New School and talk. She's also joined our seminars there. She's a wonderful, dynamic lecturer, brilliant thinker, amazing sense of humor. A little bit about her background. She is the author of the Anthropocene Backloop, Experimentation in Unsafe Operating Space. That's from Open Humanities. She's the co-editor of Resilience in the Anthropocene, Governance and Politics at the End of the World from Routledge. Her new book, The City in the Anthropocene, analyzes experimental sea rise adaptations and argues for Anthropocene critical urban theory. Again, I've been very fortunate to participate in some of her seminars, and she's just fantastic. So we're really grateful and excited that she's going to join us. Her seminar is going to explore the Anthropocene as a time of both crisis and possibility, looking at the political, imaginal, and infrastructural dimensions of the experimental design strategies that respond, adapt, and overcome contemporary social ecological dislocations. She's been working for some years on this model of the back loop, the kind of infinity figure notion of a cycle through essentially catastrophe, burn, death, recuperation, refertilization, and rebuild. And of course, one of the arguments that Stephanie makes in thinking through the back loop is that we're essentially entering the back loop at a planetary scale. So we have to think past resilience. It's a very wonderful argument that she makes in this sense that resilience, unfortunately, is a concept that's recuperated to give us the permission to think we have time because we're resilient. And so Stephanie often argues against resilience as a useful concept. And moving through the back loop and the kind of burn process of the back loop is something that I think she hopes will take us out of the false hopes of resilience. So we're very excited to have that seminar running later this year. And also, as Reza pointed out, I think we'll be sharing a seminar with Thomas Mikal, Acid Ecosophy for a Kaleidoscopic Machinic Phylum. So we're very excited. I've had a correspondence over many years with Thomas Mikal, so we're very excited that Thomas will be able to join us in that program shared seminar. Thomas will be looking at, as he puts it, the intertwining and proliferation of certain aspects of unnatural nature, cinematic modes of living, and the wider spatial arts to spore new speculative modes of thinking the biomechanical. From Bosch to bioart, they will track and scan components of a dynamic ecosophy as lucid vision and sense, following with the current interest in Felix Guattari's ecosophical aesthetics from his three ecologies, the mental, social, environmental. So this, of course, dovetails very beautifully with what Carla and I had hoped for the Postplanetary and Universal Design program in thinking past the definitions of artificial and natural and the ambitions that a low entropy or negative entropy design practice, an architectural or systems design practice would have. So those are some of the themes that we've tried to look at across the year so far, the year and a half, and some of the themes that we're trying to articulate going into the next season.
Thank you very much, Ed. Very, very interesting presentation. Looking forward
Thanks,
to
everyone.
seeing all that.
Thanks.
Now we go to our transdisciplinary program with Jason Mohaghegh. Jason is an associate professor of comparative literature at Epsom College. His scholarly focus is upon tracking currents of experimental thoughts between the Middle East and the West, with particular attention to exploring the concepts of chaos, violence, illusion, silence, madness, futurism, disappearance, and apocalyptic aesthetics. He's published books, some of them are The Chaotic Imagination, New Literature and Philosophy of the Middle East, Inflictions, The Writing of Violence in the Middle East, The Radical and Unspoken, Silencing Middle Eastern and Western Thoughts, Insurgent, Poetic, Mystic, Sectarian, The Four Masks of an Eastern Postmodernism, Omnicide, Mania, Fatality, and the Future in Delirium, and Nights, A Philosophy of the After Dark. He's also the co-editor of the Suspensions book series with Bloomsbury Press and the co-director of the 5th Disappearance Lab. The transdisciplinary program explores the unique collisions between literature, poetry, anthropology, psychoanalysis, cultural studies, media theory, the arts, sciences, design, and vernacular knowledge by engaging with strategies that capture complexity, cultivates new ecologies of knowledge, and affect individual and collective transformations. In our spring-summer season, this program will include seminars by Mohaghegh himself, Poetic and Cinematic Evil, Mina Kan Lahasade, Lalazar Nights, performance of female masculinity in popular music from the Middle East, Thomas Mikal, Acid Ecosophy for a Kaleidoscopic Mechanic Film, Simone Hoy, Elemental Ethnography, Encounters with Sensorial Analytics, and Jim Shrub, from Music and Cosmicity to Sound and Interiority, which also figures in the Art and Curatorial Practice program. So please, Jason, take it away.
Thank you very much, Cassia. In being asked always to refine the vision of transdisciplinary studies, an aphorism came to mind from a contemporary theorist who said something to the effect that there's no more philosophy in philosophy. If you want philosophy, you have to go to literature. But there's no more literature in literature. If you want literature, you have to go to film. If you want film, you should go to video games or architecture. If you want architecture, you should go to sculpture or music, and so on. Now, this is not meant in the purely literal sense, but rather it's an invitation, obviously, to traverse, trespass, and thereby expand the borders of each disciplinary sphere by projecting it 3 steps aside and into the elsewhere, where hopefully it gains some new appendages or debris along the way. And it actually corresponds well to another medieval story from a mystical writer named Rumi, and I think Reza probably was taught this in grade school, this story, as it's a well-known one. And Rumi tells the tale of a Persian king or sultan who invites the best artists from 2 lands for a competition in the palace. And there's a delegation of Chinese masters that are invited and of Roman master artists, but Roman is actually a code word here for Sufi mystics, Rumi's own name meaning Roman. So anyway, these 2 rival contingents are sent from their kingdoms to the Shah to determine which civilization possesses the best aesthetic practitioners. Both sides are given a grand parlor room facing one another to compose their works behind massive curtains, at which point the Chinese artists begin rapidly crafting the most elegant patterns across their immense plain, while the Roman artists or Sufi artists, the mystical artists, were given orders by their masters to simply polish their wall over and over again, inexorably glossing the surface to the point that it shone to some insane level of perfection. When the time arose to display their finished products, the Chinese artists revealed a tableau worthy of their highest formalized training. You know, it was adorned with hundreds of colors, with elegant silhouettes and scenes of astonishment, whereas the Romans or Sufis dropped their separating curtain to reveal only a radiant reflective canvas that somehow projected an even more magnificent version of the original Chinese image. So what this means at its most basic level is that things are enhanced, perhaps, when flung towards some slightly altered exteriority. So the delirium of an outer image world or shadow world of even more fascinating proportions and dimensions. What this tells us is that there's some existential superiority in the figment, or I know Reza's recently been writing about the clone, sort of, and we actually were talking about the potential superiority of the figure of the clone, where it can encounter itself as a simulacrum, a mechanism of reversal, or an intensified echo that sends things reeling into obscurity. So almost like the principle of those black obsidian mirrors of the ancient sorcerers who sought to perceive reality through the blurred or murky looking glass of a dim surface. And they thought that that revealed certain unspoken elements. In any case, and I'll share screen now, let's see here, if everyone can see, our 4 seminars for the semester follow this idea of analysis through some small trickery of displacement. They look in unexpected places in order to break open visionary transdisciplinary prisms. So our first seminar by Professor Thomas Mikal, who Ed very generously already mentioned, is titled Acidic Ecosophy for a Kaleidoscopic Machinic Phylum. It's a mind-bending inquiry into theories of space that looks for secrets of the city, and particularly the city's ties to enchantment and wonder in the realms of the biomechanical, the virtual, the surrealistic, and the hallucinatory. Our second seminar by Simon Howe looks at elemental ethnography to determine captivating new formulations of culture in the environmental dominions of earth, water, air, and fire. So while the first traces urban topographies through the imagination, the second traces cultural sensations in melting ice formations and storm fronts. Similarly, our third seminar, titled Lalezar Nights, Performance of Female Masculinity in Popular Music of the Middle East, traces the so-called feminine in the masculine and the masculine in the feminine. But furthermore, it looks at pressing issues of modernity, nation, and political struggle through the enigmatic lens of bodily performativity. And lastly, my own 8-week seminar on evil unravels questions usually relegated to theology, mysticism, or philosophy, but this time in the most sinister works of poetry and cinema. And then I should, of course, mention that we're so honored to have Reza engaging in our inner circle this time, sort of as a cross-listed course, and playing this same wonderful game of critically interfacing with questions of the present and the future by time traveling back to the exotic office and couch of Dr. Freud and the early psychoanalysts and their ingenuity. So he's doing the same thing in his own sort of time traveling way. So this is where we all collide and interface this term, in the conspiracy to subtly drag events from their central stations and into foreign territories. And there's something almost scientific about this gesture if we think about the idea of chirality. I'm afraid to mention this because I think Reza, who's the scientist here, is going to tell me I've got this wrong. But chiral formations, as far as I understand them, in various sciences, it's a principle of asymmetry wherein identical mirror image objects or molecules are unable to be superimposed on one another. So no matter how you rotate or translate it, it carries some component of strangeness that doesn't conform, some touch of a minor complexity or a deviation that then makes it irreducibly unfamiliar to the original. That's my thought of the essence of the transdisciplinary way. So with all that being established as a preface, I think the best way to showcase the creative brilliance of these upcoming seminars is to just quickly read their outlines. I've said this for years, that I think that tables of contents to books are themselves works of art in the hands of those who really know how to do them right. I know Ed is a fan of Michel Serres, one of the great masters of tables of contents. I mean, those alone are worth the purchase. So just to read through them together, a little bit of recitation. You see on the left, Professor Thomas McCall's acidic ecosophy for a kaleidoscopic machinic phylum consists of the following 4 segments. Lecture 1, multiple intelligences, multiple ecologies, then enchantment engines and the vegetal carnivalesque. Lecture 3, strange operations in the machinic phylum, and then finally acid ecosophy for terraforming the unconscious. Professor Simon Howe's elemental ethnography, encounters with sensorial analytics, consists of the following 4 segments. Cryos, on living without ice, Hydros, on inundations, Aeolus, on being blown away, and Solaris, on the warmth of the world. Mina Khanlarzade's Lalezar Night's performance of female masculinity in popular music of the Middle East actually has its own unique breakdown. I apologize, I couldn't access her syllabus last night, so there's some slight inaccuracies here, but the major thematic chambers that she outlined in her seminar investigate these 4 following categories. Social dreams, authenticity and inauthenticity, imaginings, culture and vulgarity, ideals, nation and periphery, fears and traumas, modernization, and the musical public. And finally, my own seminar on poetic and cinematic evil is broken into the following 4 segments. The first 2 lectures on decadence, which explore formulations of the rant, seduction, and the deviant. Then moving on to cruelty, the question of cruelty, looking at genres of the elegy, atrocity, and the whisperer. Weeks 5 and 6 on derangement, looking at genres of the riddle, chaos, and the lunatic. And then finally ending with the question of mystery, looking at the genre of the nocturne, rage, and the figure of the killer. So this is a quick vision of what we will be exploring together in the transdisciplinary side of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Really looking forward for all that too. I would like to thank you all for your presence, for your presentations on the seminars, the program, and the overall proposal for them. And once again, welcome Cécile to the new Center Board of Programmers. And I would like to reinforce that our application deadline is today at 11:59 p.m. at Eastern Time. And the link to the form is in all of our social media. It's just you look up the new center on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And I think that's that. Thank you all for watching, participating, and applying. Anyone wants to make a last remarks or no? Okay, so thank you and see you all soon. Thank you. Bye.